He's actually on vacation somewhere in the Midwest of the USA, and he's been on a few times. And the reason I had him on originally was, as many of you know, I caught on to this Shemitah sort of time frame, and after reading the book by Jonathan Cahn, and I started looking into it, and I started talking about it late last year, middle last year, and then we went through, right near the end of the Shemitah last year, there was the biggest point crash on the Dow, and actually most worldwide stock markets that were all crashing just a few weeks before the end of the Shemitah. Of course, before that, on the very end day of the Shemitah in 2008, we had the biggest point crash in history of 777 points. Before that was September 17th, the very end day of the Shemitah again, which was the biggest point collapse in the Dow again on that date. And of course, going all the way back to even 1987, it was only a few weeks, I believe, after the Shemitah that we had Black Monday. So I started catching on to all this. But what I've realized since then, Bo, is there's a lot more to it than just the 7-year cycle. There's much more sort of calculations you can do to kind of figure out some sort of time frames on when things might happen. And that really kicked in for me when I saw that Brexit happened, and the very next day we had a worldwide calamity in the stock markets, major moves down. Of course, in England, it was a massive move down. The pound dropped more than 10%, and that was 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks, and 7 days since the Shemitah of 2008. So it's very interesting calculations and all that sort of stuff. And I caught on with you because you said last year that you didn't think the Shemitah was going to be the full big collapse, and you were right on that. So I've been following you ever since. So I'm glad to have you back on.
Thank you. I really appreciate you calling me, and yeah, really look forward to speaking with you today. I think a lot of dynamic we can add to what you've been doing. I've watched some of your videos. The last one you did was fantastic as well too. So you put it together very, very nicely. But you're right. There's layers upon layers of calculations that you can do, and like the one that you just mentioned for the 7 years, 7 months, 7 days into the right after the Brexit. Interestingly enough, I took that calculation even further using a different calculation, not the quadruple 7 that you use, but I used a 360-day calculation. Gives the exact same day, but check this out. This calculation relates to JFK. So I wanted to run this because I think you'll find this rather interesting. Here, I pulled it up here. I've got it. So basically, if you go to the date of March 14th, 1967, and that was the exact date. I found that fascinating when I put that date in, and I hit Google search, and that date just literally popped up last night. I'm like, wow, that is unbelievable. So basically, from March 14th of 1967, that's the JFK. That's the date, the exact date JFK's body was moved to a permanent gravesite. Okay, so from that exact date, you run 35 cycles of 360 days, which equals 12,600. Okay, but that's Daniel's timeline, half of it if you drop a 0. So all the calculations we've always used, as you know, we've always used the Daniel's timeline calculation. So 12,600 days lands on, check this out, 9/11 to the day. Okay, then we took that further. Now we did 50 cycles of 360 days, which is exactly 18,000 days. And we'll arrive at June 24th on the stock crash, the day you just mentioned, to the exact day. Pretty fascinating.
Yeah, the more you look into these things, it is fascinating. And I've been like you, where I've sort of tried to do a few of my own calculations, and I just come up with a date, and I put it into Google, and it pops up. I'm like, oh, that was like a huge day in this, or something along those lines. Or even the end of the Jubilee on October 2nd. I just type that in, and all this stuff's happening right in and around that date. It's quite fascinating.
Right, like when we did our interview in January, we were calling for the markets to crash on that month of January, and sure enough, the markets were collapsing all the month of January and into February. And at that time point, we also talked about, I did the calculation based off the Shemitah failing of last year of September. And so the next calculation would put a major inflection point And this is based off specific calculations, and I basically posted this date of October 2nd. And so that date, now again, I don't know what the events will be related to specifically, but I can tell you specifically that that's a very important date. And then, you know, strangely enough, when you do a Google search on that day, like you just said, well, you know, what you end up finding is that, you know, the day before that, the day before that, let me see, we've got October 1st. That's the date the Chinese yuan will officially be added to the IMF's basket, SDR basket. And then the Shemitah date that we've got is October 2nd. And then, amazingly enough, with relation to the Jewish time points, you know, so October 3rd is the next day, and that's Rosh Hashanah, which is the Hebrew New Year's. So it's really interesting how that calculation lines up, you know, on that date. So I do see an immense amount of activity between today, you know. So we've got today the July 21st. Into that time point of October 2nd of 2016.
Yeah, I've actually found a number of other things related around that date. Of course, you mentioned October 1st, the Chinese yuan being added to the SDR. That's pretty massive. These sort of time points seem to correlate with sort of a changing or a washing away of things, and that really is sort of the potential change in the entire worldwide monetary system. But on September 30th is actually when the U.S. once again hits its debt ceiling. I call it a debt target because they always hit it, but it's actually on September 30th they hit their debt ceiling again. And then actually on October 2nd, and you might know more about this than me, I don't know if you've looked into this, I just keep hearing that the Jesuits are very involved in a lot of this financial elite sort of stuff. They're actually bringing in their new Jesuit priest, I guess it's sort of like their pope, on the evening, actually at midnight on October 2nd.
Wow, I didn't know that. But
Yeah.
you know, you mentioned the word pope. I did some work with relation to the Pope, and I want to do this. You might enjoy this as well too, since you brought that up. So let me pull this up here. If we go, and the relationship is a direct Pope-Israel relationship, mathematical relationship, best I can describe it. But if we start, remember the Shemitah cycle that you've been speaking about? Well, going back 50 years, the last Shemitah was on June 5th of 1966. And on that specific date, you know, the Pope basically had a speech or a talk on birth control, okay? But basically there's nothing truly fascinating about that date. But that date the year of 1966 specifically relates to the year of 2015, last year. So basically nothing really big happened. There was no stock crash because the 1966 is it's a 49th year. Okay? And so if we go to year 1967, which was on June 5th, so interestingly enough, but on June 5th, the exact day, you had the beginning of the 6-day war, you know, with relation to Israel. And how long was the 6-day war? Well, it was 6 days. But what happened on the 7th day? It was over, so it was a day of rest. And on that 7th day, basically, everybody started to go home, right? So let's run that same cycle 49 years later. So to the exact day, if we add 17,640 days, which is basically 49 cycles of 360 days, precisely, okay? On that date, we land on September 21st of 2015, last year, Jeff, okay? And that's the exact date that the Pope arrived in New York.
Yeah, I remember that, and the Pope also was in the UN, I think, to start the Jubilee year. There was all sorts of Pope-related stuff right around then.
Exactly right, but this is the Pope-Israel connection that I'm talking about, right? And so then you can take that. Now again, the 6-day war was 6 days, and it ended, and so on the 7th day everybody went home, right? Okay, well, 7 days later from the day he arrives in New York, guess what? He departs to Rome on the September 27th. Wow, okay? Mathematically extremely interesting. That's all I can say. 49 cycles of 360 days to the precise day. Okay, but remember, nothing happens specifically on the 49th year, right? When does it happen? On the 50th. That means that if you do 50 cycles of 360 days, that equates to 18,000 days, which would equate to this September, between September 15th and 20th. of 2016, okay? And then, interestingly enough, I Googled, I stuck in September 15, 2016. Interestingly enough, you know what pops up? On the Vatican website. Special Jubilee Papal Audience.
Ah, didn't know about that one.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Like, but wow. of all the dates they could have picked, it was that date, and they used the word Jubilee.
Yeah, well, he called for an emergency Jubilee year late last year. That's when I started to realize, even though I was speculating on the Jubilee, but after that, and then a number of other things, including the Bank of International Settlements, William White started talking about this is a debt Jubilee, and this has been going on for 5,000 years, dating back to the Sumerians, and most things are going to get wiped out. That's when I knew I was onto something. I just keep looking into these things, and it's just fascinating the more you look into it.
Yeah, it doesn't end. It's like I said, it's like an onion. It's layers upon layers upon layers. And then you basically just mentioned, 5,000 years. Well, I did this timeline, which is even pretty darn interesting too. You go to the birth of Jesus, and then you run, again, so the 1,260 days times 2 is 2,520. Days, or you can equate that to years, okay? You drop a 0 and you got 252 years. So interestingly enough, the entire world has been operating on a 252-year cycle. And so if you did 6 cycles of 252 years, you land on exactly the year 1512 AD. Well, interesting enough, Jeff, I did a YouTube on this, but on that time point, you have the Privileges of Parliament Act, which is basically gives England legal immunity to write laws. Okay, and then you do 7 cycles of it, and you got the Currency Act of 1764. And then which basically forced interest and the use of currency out of England on the colonies of the U.S., which basically ended up in anger, joblessness, war. But then you run 8 cycles of 252 years, and you land on this year, Jeff. And then all the time points are then we do the smaller calculations, and all of it's pointing to between right here, right now, the 21st of July. Into the time point of October 2nd.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back a little bit about the Jubilee, you brought up the Six-Day War, and that's interesting. It was called the Six-Day War, and it actually was 6 days, very biblical related sort of a thing. And he said they rested on the 7th day. That was 1967. If you go back another 50 years to the last Jubilee before that, that was when the British Empire took over Jerusalem from essentially the Arabs. So some very major moves in the Middle East, especially relating to Israel, on the last 2 Jubilees. We're in a Jubilee now, and now we just had this coup just happened in Turkey. Of course, Syria is just lying in ruins. Damascus is lying in ruins, and I think that was actually in the Bible. There's a lot of interesting things going on.
And then you do that cycle where you mentioned backwards 50 years, right? But now from 1967, you go forwards 50 years. Now this is the wild part because remember, but that from the global cycle is a completion of a 252-year cycle. So 100 years ago was still within the 252 years. So now you've got an incredible massive cycle shift. It's like, for 252 years, the wind's been blowing that direction, and now it changes that, so it's a cycle shift and change that's, supposed to occur this year. And you're right, you can keep going back years and years with these cycles, and the more you type out, the more you search you do, the more, the more you just keep scratching your head going, okay, that's one heck of a coincidence, and and there's coincidence upon coincidence.
Yeah, you can almost sense something major's happening. It's about to happen. It's happening. Just everything going on in the U.S. right now. I've made a comment about this recently. It just seems like everything's very volatile right now. Sometimes the markets go up a bunch one day and then down a bunch the other day. You're seeing lots of crazy things happen. In this Jubilee year, of course, Britain so-called exited Europe or the EU, but I'm not even sure they're going to do that. Now they've elected a new female prime minister who says she wants to drop a nuclear bomb and kill 100,000 1,000 innocent women and children, is what she said. Very interesting. There's a lot going on. But we should maybe, as interesting as this is, I need to wrap my brain around a lot of this. Let's talk about what's going on in the markets, and let's talk about maybe some of your predictions for what might happen. I know that you called the exact top of the NASDAQ in 2015. Do you think we're getting close to that top again now, I believe? Do you think that top's going to hold?
I believe it will. I believe it will. Basically, especially with today, what we're seeing here. So that cycle top was from October 31st of 2008, and it was 7 years, 7 months, and 7 weeks to the exact day on July 20th of 2015. Okay, year backwards, and today's the 21st. And we're getting the Dow and the market's rolling down. So if I'm correct, the Jubilee year was the reason for the for the top to come in. But we've had 3 tops on the NASDAQ. It's been a high in July, and then in our interview actually there was one top I think in November, which was another top or a lower high. And then prior to our interview in December to January was another lower high. And then from that time point, it dropped into the low in February of this past year. And now we've come back up. But again, it's a descending slope. It's another lower high. So on the NASDAQ, we've got 3 lower highs. And the 3rd lower high just came in now. So if the Jubilee year is correct, then starting now, the markets are supposed to roll over right here, right now. So as I said in the year 2000, and on June 20th of 2015, is the top should be in here today or now. Same thing, stands for right now. The top on the world equity market should be here in today or now. So we'll see if it follows through. But if that is the case, then what initially you were talking about earlier about the year 2008, and remember that when the Dow had fallen 777 points, that was the largest one-day crash in history, correct? What happened last year was when in the month of August, the Dow dropped between 5 days. It fell over, I think, 2,500 points possibly, or close to that, or 2,200 points. But on the 24th, I think it was, it fell. It actually took over the date of 2008, where it's 777 points. The Dow fell over 1,000 points.
Intraday, yes. I forget where it closed, but yeah, that was
last
by
year.
far
So
the
it
biggest.
actually took over as the official day of the biggest one-day drop in history. Okay, so what in my calculations right now, this is really interesting because based off the historic calculations, I'm foreseeing between today, which is the 21st of July, into October 2nd, we're supposed to have the third biggest, or actually this will be now, it'll overtake the prior 2, let's put it that way. So this next drop should overtake the prior 2 drops and be officially the biggest one-day drop in history is expected, so between today and the date of October 2nd on the equity market. So, we do have that date, but I can tell you, right now it will be, between this time point and the date of October.
Yeah, I've got a lot of suspicion about both August and September, about just my sense. It just feels like it.
And I'll give you the date, David. I'm sorry, I will give you the date, Jeff. But the point is that it will be in one of those 2 months you just mentioned. So that's what I'm foreseeing exactly.
Great. And I know in order to get the exact dates, you do have a newsletter that people can subscribe to get more of this information.
Within our stock index, so we do provide that to people. But again, it's just the main thing that I want to emphasize to everybody is don't be if you're in the markets, it's the wrong place to be. You need to be owning gold and silver. That's really the place to be sitting right now, because basically when all the dust settles, what will rise out of the dust will be God's money, gold and silver, and that will protect you in the years forward.
Yeah, and I remember it was just a few months ago that you gave an exact date to me on when you thought gold and silver were really going to start moving higher, and it actually did start moving higher right on that exact date, and it moved much higher within a month or two of that. So that was another excellent call.
Thanks. Yeah. So our the gold cycle has been progressing very nicely. If you look at gold when we were in when I was speaking in January at the conference in Vancouver, I basically said the very end, I think it was the 28th. I think it was the 28th of January. Gold was supposed to jump up and never come back, and sure enough, it did that. It took off, and then you'll notice since January, it's made a high. It made a higher high. And another higher high. It keeps going higher.
Yeah.
It keeps going. I'm sorry, the video feed. It seems to be going higher and higher. And so the connect. Are we there, Dan?
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay. I'm sorry. My connection might have frozen. But anyways, the gold continues to proceed higher and higher and higher. So it basically is in a very, very nice, beautiful bull trend. And I believe between now and the end of this year, we are going to see some incredible moves to the upside on gold and silver, and I do still absolutely foresee new all-time highs, and so that's my position on gold and silver.
That's great. Always fascinating, Bo. Why don't you let people know where they can get more information on what you do?
Our website is gold2020forecast.com, gold2020forecast.com. And then we do have a YouTube channel. Again, just type in the same name or my name. And all of our interviews, including this one we're going to do today, Jeff, we're doing today, I will link onto there as well too. And again, I just really encourage people to be informed. And from where this is, where we're presently at with relation to the world markets, it's extremely important to be aware of what's going on. And again, owning gold and silver, and most importantly, being aware of who God is. That's number one. So all the best, Jeff, and I really appreciate the interview. Thank you very much. Yeah,
all the best to you too, Bo, and totally agree with what you just said. And so people out there, pay attention to what's going on right now. If you haven't, even if you don't pay attention to all these dates and things like that, there's major things going on in the world today, and it's time to pay attention, because this is going to be a time, I think, unlike anything we've ever seen in our lifetimes, at the very least. So I appreciate Bo coming on. If you like this information, please like, subscribe, share to these videos down below. If you want even more information, we have our own newsletter, The Dollar Vigilante. Just check it out at dollarvigilante.com/subscribe. We write a few issues a month. They're usually 50-plus pages. Information like this, plus much more, even just detailed economic and financial information from our senior analyst, Ed Bugos. And we've had an amazing track record. He just did the calculations. I think our portfolio is up 200% in the last 1 year. So very good. And so many big wins in the meantime. So that's been going very well. So once again, thank you very much, Bo Polny, and check out his stuff. And that's it for the Dollar Vigilante. Stay safe out there.
You have all the major central banks, Japan, UK, Europe, America, all printing staggering amounts of money. The people who are getting that money, Jeff, are very happy, and their friends are very happy.
I believe in 2020 that we will be back into a rip-roaring, snorting bull market.
They may increase interest rates by 0.25% to kind of prove to the world how responsible they are.
Government is always mankind's biggest enemy throughout human history. It always has been. It's what destroyed Rome. It's what every empire has collapsed, and every war and all the billions of people have been killed. It's all due to government. So it is always our enemy.